Hey, everybody. I'm excited to be here today to talk with our friend Christopher, who has inspired us in a lot of ways. And if you like to drink coffee, he'll probably inspire you too. And today we're just going to kind of get in the nitty gritty. How did he get started? What makes a good cup of Joe? And whatever else might pop up. So have a listen, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy because we're all fun. We're fun people. Well, Christopher, yeah, I'm excited to have you on. I mean, we've talked a lot in person and mostly about coffee. So I'm kind of hoping we get into a little bit more of your like deep hidden secrets today.
All right. Yeah, I'll do the best I can. Yeah, I'm stoked to be here.
Well, the
And
segue to that is just I'm curious, like growing up, was coffee roaster and like coffee connoisseur, like that was your aim, that was your goal?
no, not in the slightest. No,
How did you
several
get here?
I've had several career paths. I'm on my third or fourth career. I worked, I went to school for horticulture technologies and worked in the horticulture and agriculture field for several years, and then as a consultant for farms. And it wasn't until I was maybe, 25, 26 that I got into specialty coffee and really got the coffee bug as far as wanting to learn, everything there is to know about this whole, you know, um, the beverage, but then also the value chain behind it. Um, because, obviously we don't produce coffee here in the States, aside from Hawaii. But so this product has to travel a long way as, a very important agricultural crop for people around, the world, primarily around the equator. Um, but I'm not sure about the statistics, but we consume a lot of coffee in the States. And it's just, um, fascinating to me to kind of illuminate for people, what this crop means and what our coffee consumption means to these coffee farming communities around the world.
I think it was interesting. Like they were saying, for the audience, we both went to the same coffee farm, well, like about a month apart from each other.
Yeah. Akiari's estate.
Yeah,
in Costa Rica.
And they were saying that the majority of the coffee that is consumed, it's like 80% of it is consumed before like 10 a.m. around the world. Yeah, which is it's like that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, but 10 a.m. is moving across the globe, so I feel like that just means 24/7.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, somebody is
it's 5 o'clock somewhere, right?
Yeah, totally.
I thought like I kind of wanted to talk about the value chain some too, because that is like having gone now and I don't know, like, so we're so, with our private food club, we're so specific with all of our food, but in coffee, like I was kind of just trusting you with coffee, because like I've met you and I know your passion level and I'm like, okay, like, but to like, then when we got down there, I was like, it's kind of no brainer that like we're at the farm. Like we've been to every farm in the food club except the coffee one, which I would say,
well, maybe not chocolate.
Maybe not chocolate.
No, that's next.
That's next. But yeah, it's like it's such a lot for us. Like Lacey and I are so passionate about coffee. Like it's a large part of our family consumption too, I guess.
There were a lot of like different levels to it because so I work with Essential Oil Company, and one of the things they do is they source directly from farmers. So if I want to learn about a farmer, I can go online and watch the video of our farmers and kind of get to know them and their story and their history and like how they got into it. And our company is really dedicated to kind of traveling the globe. And I'm always really thankful for that I know where it's coming from, but I don't have to go, that is it gives me some confidence in the supply chain, like, and knowing all of that. But then we're at Aquiares and we're there for the coffee, but they actually are doing some really cool things, exploring essential oils and growing those herbs to start this other thing on the farm to enhance their diversity. And it just kind of like, it made me kind of more aware of how unaware we are of everything else. Yeah, like, I mean, we are a little obsessive compared to probably most average American consumer, but how unaware people are of where their food is coming from. It just feels like this huge, I don't know, like detrimental, probably what's wrong with all the food and all the health and all of the, like, it's just like huge to be separate from where your food is coming from. So I'm curious, like, even talking back about like how you got started. So you started drinking a cup of coffee and then you're like, let's go to Costa Rica and go to the farm. Or how did you end up kind of starting to source and roast and all of that?
Yeah, well, so my story with coffee is simply that, you know, I in my teenage years I would always hang out at coffee shops. I like the vibe or the atmosphere, whether it was like, a jazzy like Tate Street coffee shop, sort of the more old school um cafes. And I guess I felt like um I had some notion that like from back in the beatnik, 60s, like the coffee houses, or where all the poets and creatives and even radicals would hang out. Um, and so I always gravitated toward coffee shops. Around 25 or 26, I took a trip to Europe, just like a backpacking trip around a few different countries. And it wasn't a coffee trip or anything. I just happened to stumble upon a few cafes that really blew my mind in terms of like their focus on quality and highlighting these single origins and things like that, and being the baristas being able to elaborate on those origins a little bit, in addition to the objective like science around preparing the perfect espresso shot. And I was fascinated by espresso machines and how all the equipment worked. And I was sitting in a cafe in my town in Nevada City, California. And I was just on my laptop and I was reading about coffee stuff. And I was like, man, I really want to get behind an espresso machine and just like try out all these knobs and handles and figure out how it all works. And I just like don't have one. And I was living out the back of my truck at the time with my dog. Yeah. And so I went up to the manager of this like really small cafe. She was running the place like by herself, and I was like, "Hey, could I like be a barista and just work for tips? Like, I really just want to like learn how to make these drinks and stuff." So that's like how interested I was.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You didn't even start as a barista, like for actual money. You just were like, I want to do this as a hobby.
I really wanted to learn.
That's crazy.
And then within a few months, I ended up getting a barista job at another place. It was a natural foods co-op. And so I worked as a barista there for like, I don't know, a year and a half. So I was into coffee. I had a really good friend who was a roaster there in Nevada City. And so I was also very intrigued by his whole process. He roasted the coffee at home or in his garage, and then he had a little hole in the wall espresso shop that my friends and I would hang out at. And then in 2020, fast forward like 3 or 4 years, the pandemic happens, and all of my barista friends and coffee workers here in Greensboro, I had moved back to Greensboro by then. They were all laid off pretty abruptly during the pandemic. So we had a lot of disenfranchised coffee people, and all my barista friends were posting fundraisers to try to pay their rent, because management or ownership decided to just cut their costs, cut their losses. Like, this is a pandemic, we have to let everyone go. And a lot of people were just kind of hung out to dry. And so myself and my co-founder, Ashley Griffith, we started scheming, and I had a little bit of money. So I bought a small roaster, and we thought we'll just start roasting coffee and selling it through e-commerce, through Instagram. Everyone's buying a lot of things online during that time. And then as we, sort of, thought about what we wanted to bring to the coffee industry, what we want to represent, we chose the name Loom for our roastery. And loom is, a piece of textile equipment that weaves the various threads together to make this stronger fabric. And so the metaphor, I guess, there is that we want to weave together these really powerful stories from these coffee origins, and really highlight the human element. Like this coffee that ends up in your cup is the result of many people's, hard work and like their lived experience that's coming to all the way here through many different hands to bring you this experience, the consumer, and you have your own story and relationship with coffee. And so when those things all come together, it's really a big tapestry of cooperation, and really powerful stories. And that's, that culminate to make our, coffee community. And you spoke a little bit about how we're rather alienated from a lot of, the things that we consume, and we don't have, and so it's important to us to convey that human element, and to say like you got to go there, you got to meet the people on the farm, and not everyone will be able to do that, but we can at least try and honor, the work that they're doing. And also, like, understand like life looks very different for folks in those areas. And a big element of the specialty coffee movement, where we're trying to highlight these origins, and maybe the coffee costs a little bit more, that all serves to create an incentive structure for those farmers to get a better price per pound. And we as consumers, have to see the value in that product, and also, the level of quality that's going to be more desirable for our market here in the US. So as a roaster, it's on us to convey that value, that story, and to, that's our role within that value chain and that incentive structure.
What's funny about your name is I thought it was really, I love how you described it, and makes so much more sense now. But I really thought it was sort of an homage to the textile industry in Greensboro.
Yeah, no, totally.
It's just an added layer, right?
Yeah, it works both ways. That was like the other element. We have a rich, history of, textiles here. With the cone denim and, all the others. So.
Yeah, what a beautiful layer. I love a double entendre.
Right?
Double entendre. There it is. Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so when you are choosing a farm to work with, how do you get started in that process? Because it feels like, okay, you got the whole world at your fingertips. Like, how do you get started in one direction or another?
Yeah, so what that process looks like for us as a roaster, it's exceedingly rare that a roaster is working directly with the farm, in Costa Rica or in Ethiopia, someone who's really mindful about, where their food or where their beverages come from might want to imagine like, oh, the roaster is there working directly with the farmer, and you get the handshake photo, that origin trip. But in reality, the importing of that green coffee, a bag of green coffee is around 156 pounds. To import that agricultural product is kind of its own specialization. This stuff has to go through the ports, through customs, be loaded onto freight containers.
Right.
And so as a roaster, we look to our importing partners, green coffee importers, and there are plenty of them out there. It's big business, bringing green coffee from all over the world to the States. And that being said, there are some that are going to be more in line with our values than others.
Right.
So we seek out importers who have that traceability that we're looking for, quality, of course, in the coffee. And then also, most importantly, that they have a long-term mutually beneficial relationship with those farmers. That because as a green coffee importer, you could go into a community and with the mindset of, oh, I need to get as many pounds for as few pennies as possible, and then take it and flip it to these roasters, and that doesn't improve the quality of life for those farmers, makes it more difficult for them, especially because if that farmer has to compete on price, there's always somebody that's going to beat you on price. It's a race to the bottom. And so we look for importers that have that long-term purchasing relationship with the farms. So in the instance of Akiari's estate in Costa Rica, we were introduced to them through an importer called Ally Coffee. And Ally is based out of Greenville, South Carolina. And they've been working with Aquiares and a lot of other farms for years. And Ally, they're a sizable company. And the benefit to the farmers is that when the quality is right, that an Ally will commit to purchasing, large quantities from these farmers year after year. And even in some cases, purchasing that crop before it's even been grown. And so if that would be like a forward contract where it's, as long as the quality is on par with what it was last year, we will buy this, this entire lot from you in the upcoming year. And as you guys are farmers, as you can imagine, that's the ideal as far as security financially, is to know that your crop is sold before you even grow it.
That's
and
pretty
so people think of the importer. Sometimes you might imagine they're like just a middleman who's just going to mark this stuff up, but they play a really crucial role. They in that regard for providing purchasing security for those farmers, but they also finance roasters in certain ways by giving us terms on that coffee.
Oh wow!
So they really do a lot to facilitate just the movement of the coffee. And then also the thing we love about Ally Coffee importers, they even do a lot of education on the farm level or at the milling facility. If there are issues with quality, they'll work with the folks at that origin. They'll have personnel in Ethiopia, in Costa Rica, that can advise, hey, if you can tweak this one little part of your process, your coffee is going to score this much higher, and we can get you, a better price for your coffee.
Well, that's what I think I loved about when we were at Costa Rica, is really realizing the variety that one coffee grower can produce, because you think that even all the bushes are the same, because in Costa Rica we learned they only can grow the Arabica. There we go. Coffee variety that the country has said that's the quality that they want leaving Costa Rica, so they have that as a base. But on that estate, they were processing those beans in so many different ways, and the beans that grew at a lower altitude were a lesser quality, and I mean it was just really fascinating. And then also how the demand was driving what they were producing. So they're seeing, more and more people want the 72-hour process. So they're upping how much of that they're making. And, comparing okay, well, we can make less beans, but make them more valuable. it just is a really interesting thing to watch how the consumer is really driving the economy there.
Well, and they were like talking about they're starting to experiment. Like they realize that I guess the fermented variety is like really popular. So they're fermenting in all kinds of different things. Like he was saying, they're starting to ferment in like kefir and wani llama and like all these like random things just to see like, how does that work? You know? And it's that's pretty cool.
What new thing can we develop that the consumer is eager to try, you know, something different, unique.
Yeah. And I think one thing to recognize there, one thing that for, you know, all the, you know, faults that we could find in the specialty coffee industry, it's not a perfect system. It's not, you know, it's all a work in progress. And as an industry, we're having to, you know, pivot and change course, you know, throughout the, you know, the last couple of decades. But one awesome thing about it is, you know, I mentioned that incentive structure for farmers to really push toward quality. So that if they grow some phenomenal coffee, they know that they could get 2 or 3 or 4 times the price per pound that that they would have gotten on the what we would call the commodity market. There, when I say specialty coffee, that's what we deal in, and in contrast to that is what's called the commodity coffee market, which is commodity coffee is what your big companies like Folgers or, you know, Nestle would
restaurant coffee.
Yeah, it's the coffee that is literally traded on the Chicago Board of Trade. Like you can go there and you can buy and trade coffee contracts, and that contract might represent, you know, 1,000 bags or, you know, 10 freight containers full of coffee. And so big corporations, you know, over the last like 100 years or so, this system has developed where they can go ahead and contract, you know, 100 shipping containers full of this commodity grade coffee, and it'll be full of defects. Generally the price hovers around $2.50 a pound.
Oh wow.
For that green coffee. And because the quality control isn't there, they roast it dark to, you know, so you can't recognize any of those defects. Coffee all kind of tastes the same when you roast it super dark.
Just burn
it. Yeah, exactly. All you taste is carbon and ash. And so that there are a lot of, you know, there's a lot of coffee farming for that commodity market. And if that farmer is getting, you know, $2.50 per pound, all right, and then, you know, you consider how long it would take to pick a pound of fresh coffee cherries, and most coffee is hand picked.
We did it on the farm.
Yeah. And
we did. And I mean, he said there's not really a mechanism to pick coffee. So I don't know. I mean, maybe there is in other parts of the world or something, but on that farm, especially, I mean, the hills are just insane, right? Like you can't drive tractors there. Like, I don't think in all of Costa Rica there's a single lawnmower. They only weed whack.
Right.
Because there's too many hills.
The other thing that surprised me was like all the beans or berries, they don't ripen at the same time. So like you have to like pick, you know,
you have to pay attention. Yeah. And I've worked on a blueberry farm in Rockingham County for a while. Yeah. And so, you have to be mindful, you know, you're not picking unripe cherries. But and Brazil is the only country where there's any mechanical harvesting, really. Anywhere else in the world, those cherries are picked by hand. But what I'm getting at is, I don't know if Diego told you how many seasonal workers they bring in. I think it's something like 2,500.
That's a lot.
I feel, I think
a lot. A lot of seasonal workers for the harvest. And so what does life look like for those seasonal, you know, cherry pickers? if the farmer is only getting $2.50 per pound, they say a lot of times, in parts of Ethiopia, I've heard it said that a coffee cherry picker makes in 1 month what we would spend on a Starbucks latte. So like $5 or $6.
Wow.
For the whole month of picking
point of
coffee.
reference, can you tell us how much a green pound of coffee would cost if you were getting the good stuff on average?
So specialty grades of green coffee for us is usually 2 to 3 to 4 times that commodity coffee price.
Okay. Yeah.
So it could be $5, $6, even $10 or $12 a pound, and it's kind of the sky's the limit when the farmer realizes there's actually like, I could take a big risk and try this experimental process and come up with a coffee flavor profile that's never been tasted before, that's going to blow everyone's mind. I could sell it for $20 a pound.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Or I can enter this coffee into a competition, to get rewarded for this innovation that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And actually, like, there are lots of coffee that are sold for $100 a pound for the green because they're an award-winning,
wow,
very unique lot. So I think that's a really interesting part of the whole incentive structure behind specialty coffee, and what that industry can provide for farmers is the opportunity to do that kind of experimentation. Mm-hmm. It's a huge risk to take a portion of their crop and try an experimental processing method. Yeah. Like to say, oh, we're going to ferment this one for 72 hours with kefir and, orange peels.
Yeah.
That's, if it goes wrong, that coffee is just undrinkable.
Yeah.
Is nasty. Yeah. But then, so that there's, it kind of opens up the door for a lot of experimentation and research around flavor. And also, the coffees that your CSA, that your buyers club have tried from us would be like the Aquiares variety Centro Americano and the Esperanza red honey variety. And both of those are relatively new hybrid coffee plants. And so those are plants that Diego has selected, and he and his team have selected because of their resistance to certain diseases, and also resistance to drought, because climate change is set to cut the growing area for coffee in half by the year 2050.
Wow.
On the path that we're on, because coffee only grows at high elevations, it requires a certain sort of microclimate to really thrive. They say by 2050, we're going to have half as much land to grow coffee. So there's really a fire underneath the industry to come up with, it's a lot of breeding experiments, a lot of breeding of new coffee, hybrids, crossing plants that are more drought tolerant, more disease tolerant, to literally save the coffee industry.
That's interesting, because like after breaking it down, like on our way over there, I was like kind of breaking down the numbers with Lacey of like, okay, if we get coffee from Christopher at this price, if we go, all the way down, like how much is the picker making? And it's not very much at all.
Well, then they told us on the tour.
They told us on the tour, and I don't want to say the number out loud. It was a
say now everybody's.
It was a small amount.
It was $12 a day.
Yeah, if they picked like optimally, $12 a day.
They get paid by the bag.
But and then I was just like, man, we're not paying enough for coffee then. Like,
I mean, that is the message that we're screaming to, our entire customer base. But you gotta be real careful with how everyone, around the world right now is super price sensitive. With inflation and everything, nobody's got a ton of cash that, really throwing around on just household goods.
Mm-hmm.
But then,
but maybe it's like it's like someone, I got in a conversation with somebody not too long ago that was like saying that they couldn't afford grass-fed beef. It was too expensive. And how dare my self-righteousness say that
holier than thou.
Yeah, they called me holier than thou because I said you should only eat grass-fed beef, but they eat a steak every day, is what they said.
2 steaks a day.
2 steaks a day.
This particular person.
And that there's no way they can afford to eat 2 steaks a day if it's grass-fed beef.
You have to cut it down to 1 steak per day.
Right, yeah. And
you know how
so the compensation is never on the end of making sure you're sourcing and everyone along the line is fair. It's that I deserve 2 steaks a day. So it's just like shifting. And I, like maybe you do deserve 2 steaks a day, but get a second job, like you're going to have to make a sacrifice one way or the other. And I think ultimately, like the truth is he may deserve 2 steaks a day. And if he doesn't feel like he deserves grass fed, well, that's a shame because their benefits far outweigh, but the cost.
So that makes me think the same thing. I deserve 2 coffees a day. Right. Definitely.
And would you rather have the 2, commodity grade coffees, or would you rather have one, small cup of really phenomenal coffee?
Right.
That's traceable, that you can feel better about, spending your money that way.
That people are getting paid for it. And
And back to the wages that are paid, on the farms, $12 a day, it is apples and oranges to,
right. Well, that's the thing.
Money spends differently down there, but it's still, they still need to be paid more. Absolutely. But what
it's hard to have a frame of reference for that lifestyle versus our lifestyle, because the way that some people live is, like maybe it's more honorable than how we live in a consumer based mindset, like there's
definitely less consumption oriented, but they still deserve, better wages.
Right.
And the only way that Diego and other farmers can make those numbers work, it's not that they want to pay them less, they want to pay them a fair wage.
Yeah.
And honestly, like at Aquiares, for example, they pay better wages than other coffee farms in the area. Yeah. So even $12 a day sounds low. They're actually, paying a premium in order to remain competitive, because they have a labor shortage.
I will say,
they
did I thought it was cool. Like some of the things they did was like they had like housing and
healthcare,
internet and healthcare, and so like almost all of their living expenses are covered. They let them plant like crops in between the coffee rows that like kind of like their own gardens in between the rows.
Yeah, that was something that really impressed me.
Yeah. And they pay cash every day to the workers, which I was like, man, that goes a huge way if if you're not having to wait like a week, 2 weeks, or a month to get paid. But yeah.
And I mean, just like here, I think in Costa Rica, most of the Costa Ricans that are native Costa Ricans are now at a place where they don't want to be picking, in the fields. It's just not what most culturally they're doing. They're taking other jobs. They're going to universities. They're, doing different things now. And so a lot of their workers, just like American workers, are coming in from neighboring countries like
Nicaragua. Yeah. And it is just like the phenomenon we see here in the US, with say tobacco farming. You don't see these white kids who grew up on a tobacco farm out picking tobacco leaves.
Right.
But and one thing that impressed me also about that farm was, if you go into where they have their big drying units for the coffee beans and see the huge piles of wood that fuel their furnaces, and that all of the those drying units, all the furnaces are just burning just wood that's fallen naturally, or saplings that have grown up in the in the farm. So their emphasis on sustainability was really impressive.
Yeah, there were a lot of closed circles like that. Oh, there was another one. Now I can't remember.
So they take all the like, it's something that falls off the coffee bean, and they use that
the husks
in the honey
husk,
and all that, and they use that as a composted and make it a fertilizer.
Yeah, but as we think about, you know, the people who are picking our coffee, the people that are working at the mills and things like that, and we see that that gap in, you know, pay that leads to, you know, translates to quality of life, you know, regardless of where you are. The question to ask ourselves is, what can we as consumers here, you know, in probably the biggest coffee consuming country, you know, if I had to guess,
right?
What can we do as consumers to improve that situation? And so as a roaster, we just try to illuminate, you know, the human aspect of it. And I think that if you can, as you drink your cup of coffee or whatever, you know, if you're eating your steak and you can you know, honor that this is the result of someone's, you know, really hard work. It's not a commodity that we just take for granted and oh, I want a bigger cup of coffee for less dollars. You know, to really sit with the things that you're consuming and consider how your actions affect you know, you know, the whole supply chain, the whole value chain, and
essentially a large part of the world. I mean, it's crazy, like how much, like you said in the beginning, how much coffee travels and how many hands touch it. And, you know, if all of those people are paid fairly, like just like you said, sitting there and just, if nothing else, as you're sipping it, like thinking about that connection. Like I do now when I make coffee, you know, I'm like, man, like thinking about those women and children essentially on the hillside picking coffee beans. And like,
I will point out,
now it's in my house.
It's a very lovely place to pick coffee.
Yeah, I was. If I had a
beautiful,
farm,
very
beautiful. It wasn't super hot. It was like kind of. I could have stood there and picked coffee for a really long time.
We had to pull Lacey
every day, but I was enjoying myself.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Obviously, I can't live on $12 a day though. So
we could there.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah.
Well, just to shifting gears a little bit, like when we're talking about making coffee, I'd love to share some maybe inside tips or hacks, or I don't know, whatever you want to call them, for like making the perfect cup of coffee for our listeners. And it could be, I mean, I know a lot of people rely on drip, so I don't know if you have any like drip tips. Maybe you're like, yeah, get rid of the drip. I don't know. Or French press, I would say, is probably the second most common way I see people drinking coffee. And then third, I would think would maybe be espresso at home. If we're not talking about if we eliminate K cups from the
let's eliminate.
We won't get into K cups. But, but okay, drip coffee.
So what are some tips for the best cup of drip coffee? Yeah,
with your drip coffee maker. The biggest tip there, if it's an automatic, you know, unit, there's probably not a lot that you can tweak. But to have fresh beans, freshly ground beans, if you get a bag of beans, if it's from a reputable roaster, it should have the date on the bag that it was roasted, the roast date. And it's good to let those coffees rest about a week and a half or 2 weeks from that roast date.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. People think, you know, it's all about freshness and we want these beans as fresh off of roast as possible. But when the coffee beans come out of the roaster, they've just gone through all these, you know, thermal, you know, a lot of thermal, you know, chemical actions have happened during that roasting process. And they're off gassing a lot of volatile, you know, aromatics, and CO2 is a big one. Basically, they're off gassing CO2 pretty intensely for that first week or so off of roast. And that's going to affect the flavor profile. You're not going to get the most clear read on that coffee flavor profile unless you let it rest for, you know, at least a week. I think 2 to 3 weeks is a real sweet spot where that flavor profile really comes into its own.
And I'm glad I asked this question.
So when you roast, do you wait that long before you like distribute it out?
Them?
Or
we try to.
Yeah.
That's we ask for if we're supplying to a cafe or something like that, a wholesale account, we ask for 5 days lead time. That's because we're going to roast it. We're going to try to let it chill for about 5 days, just so you get a little head start.
Yeah.
It gets to you at a place where you can taste it, and it's going to be nearly optimal. But I think 2 to 3 weeks out is really good. And but then if I were to bring coffee to someone and it's 2 or 3 weeks off of roast, then
drink it right now.
Have some explaining to do, because they're like, oh, this coffee's 2 or 3 weeks old. And I'm like, no, listen, it's going to be better this way. French press, I would say the thing to watch out for with French press is agitation, because that's an immersion brewing method. You're just immersing the grounds into hot water rather than pouring the water over them. Mm-hmm. With immersion methods, they can be subject to or prone to over extraction, and some bitterness comes out. So you want to go with very little agitation. Like, just put it in the French press. It doesn't actually matter when you push the plunger. You could not push it. Yeah, you could not push it at all.
I thought you had to go down and then come back up and then wait and go down.
That might be too much agitation. I don't know. And the final thing with French press, total brew time should be about 3.5 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And so I would just put your coffee in there, put your water in there, plunge it or don't, and then set a timer for 3.5 minutes, and then decant into a different vessel. There's a lot of folks, they'll make a French press, they'll pour out a cup, and then they just leave it sitting on the counter. Yeah. They come back to it at 1 in the afternoon and get another cup, and it'll be over extracted. So you get some bitterness, some just not so clean flavors. Those are my tips. My final tip for any brewing method is to go to our website and buy coffees from us. So you're using really high quality coffee.
Right?
Very cool. Well, and we haven't talked about it fully yet, but our hope is that we can come up with a schoolhouse roast with you, and then maybe on our website you can get some of that amazing stuff too.
But, we got to get you guys over to the roastery. We'll cup some coffees. We'll taste through everything. We'll put together a blend or something for you guys. Yeah,
that sounds amazing. Awesome. I'm really excited about that.
So how can people connect with you, Christopher? I mean,
I did want to point this out actually, because when we were at Aquiares, Diego happened to be in the B&B with us, which if you ever are going to Costa Rica and you want to go someplace that's off the beaten path and that you'll get to ride horses if you want to, and do a coffee tour if you want to, and all of these amazing things, then you should go. And they have this beautiful it's 100 years old. They have amazing gardens on the property, and they serve breakfast, and you can also get dinner there, which their dinner is just, we were really impressed with the food.
George is killing it.
George, he's a great cook. He's a great baker. Really good food, man.
He's doing really good. Anyway, Diego happened to pop through a couple of times while we were there. We got to talking about how we, use his coffee and sell his coffee through our food club. And he's like, oh, Christopher. He's like, man, that guy is killing it on Instagram.
Follow us on Instagram. It's probably the best way to get in touch. Send us a message on Instagram.
Loom Coffee, right?
Yep, loom.coffee. And our website is the same. It's loom.coffee. There's no .com.
No .com.
It's just loom.coffee.
Love that.
Oh, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for your passion. I feel like we are very nerdy about coffee, but we're not as nerdy as you. So it's really comforting to meet somebody who's raising the bar and makes us look normal.
Well, happy to sit with you guys. Always a pleasure.
Awesome.
We'll have a good one, and everyone stay in touch with Chris.
Go buy some coffee from Christopher.
You won't regret it. Right? That's right.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.